now moving on to Bruce, and Bruce will be joined by Viv Levy from the Horton Agency, who will be giving a run through of how it can be applied to a case study. Again, this is on the susdrain website, and I will leave that with Bruce to take control of the screen. You can.
Yeah, hopefully that's come up, Paul. So you can see the introductory slide. We're just going to talk briefly for a few minutes about a case study that we've developed. And first, I'll pass over to Viv Levy, if that's all right. Viv, if you're there, just to give you a bit of background to the scheme, and then I will show how we've used that information to populate the tool.
Thank you, Bruce. So very briefly, to give you a context for the project, this study considers a change of use for a 32-acre site in the north of Guildford. The site sits on the fringes of urbanised Guildford and is bound by to the north by a road and to the south by an industrial estate with over 100 businesses. It currently has no public access and is currently used for livestock grazing and habitat provision for diverse wetland birds. The Environment Agency was interested in the site because the River Wey crosses it, and there's an opportunity to create a natural bypass channel for a weir adjacent to the site to allow fish passage, and there's also the opportunity to create spawning habitat for fish and other river wildlife. So the council developed a proposal for the site to be turned into suitable alternative green space to support a new housing development plan for the site, which would make the site publicly accessible. So the vision for this development would include partnering with the local wildlife trust to create a wetland nature reserve as a public amenity for the local population. This would include a visitor centre, cafe and car park. Creating a bypass channel for fish passage and new spawning habitat, and significant tree planting along the site boundaries. During the development phase of BEST, we offered this as a case study to trial the tool. So we used Series BEST tool to calculate the environmental and social costs and benefits of land use change. And we chose the tool because it takes an ecosystem services and natural capital approach in line with the 25-year environment plan. And it facilitated partnership working by capturing the multiple benefits that each partner is concerned with. So we started out by using the screening tool earlier discussed to identify the significant benefit categories associated with land use change. And I don't know if at this stage, Bruce, you want to take over and go through which categories we chose, or?
Sure.
Yeah.
Thanks, Viv. Yeah, that's great. So, yeah, I think this is a really good example of how BEST can be used for quite a diverse range of schemes potentially. So this has got nothing to do really with drainage or sustainable drainage, but it is clearly improving the amenity of an area and introducing a new and more accessible types of green and blue infrastructure. So as we've said, we wanted to use it as to see how the tool could cope with this type of scheme, which we haven't previously kind of applied it to in the past, I guess. So the project input sheets that you can see at the moment, hopefully just brings across some of that information that Viv was talking about. And I'll go to the screening questions. So this again just enables you to identify which of the benefit categories are likely to be most interesting or significant for the scheme. So we've highlighted where we think the most benefits are likely to accrue, and given in the orange boxes on the right hand side some justification and some reasoning for that we can trace back and have a bit of an audit trail to why we've why we've done what we've done and why we've chosen the numbers and so on. So in this case, because of the amount of green infrastructure and the number of trees being planted and because of its proximity to populated areas, which is pretty close by. There's towns and villages adjoining the area. Air quality was thought to be quite a big one. Amenity as well, for the same reason, because of the proximity and the increase in accessibility. So there's no accessibility to the site really at the moment for the public, and that will change significantly. And then some of the other ones around carbon, and again that's linked to the amount of green infrastructure and education. And I think I'll talk about education because of the visitor centre that's planned as part of the site. So I'll come onto that sheet in a moment. And some of the other ones as well that we looked at were health and well-being, and also I think at the bottom, water quality. So those were the kind of categories we focused on. You could look at others, and biodiversity and flood risk, for example, but we have, in this case study, we haven't looked at those in detail at the moment. So I'm just going to go across, given time, I'm only going to look at one of the benefit category sheets, and that's education. So when you open or enable the education sheet, as Chris pointed out, you get a choice of which kind of route you want to go down for the assessment. So if you've already undertaken a kind of offline assessment of the impacts in this category, then you can use this section Edu1. We haven't done that, so we're using our own kind of estimates and information based on the technical guidance. So we're going to use Edu2. So if I just go down to that section, Edu2, you get this, you're presented with this, and really it's the difference between the baseline and the proposed option. And it's that, again, that marginal change that we're trying to assess the benefit of. So at the moment, we've got no visitors to the area in that orange box, that's why there's a 0, and we're suggesting, based on the introduction of the scheme, we could have a minimum of 500 students visiting per year, and that's kind of an estimate based on information in the guidance, but it's kind of a ballpark, but we think we can justify it, given that there are kind of centres of population close by, and there will be a dedicated resource around education on the site. You can then choose the, as Chris said, from the drop-down boxes in blue. You can choose the monetary value in this case, and we've gone for the lowest one because we have less confidence, I guess, or we're not entirely sure that impact pathway of that degree of causation. So will this scheme actually lead to this benefit in terms of the additional number of students visiting the area? We're not entirely 100% sure about that, but we think there's a reasonable likelihood. But we've gone for a kind of conservative approach. And that's based on the monetary values in this case. There's more detail in the guidance of where these numbers come from, but it's based on a study that was used for the UK National Ecosystem Assessment a few years ago, and it's based on the value of nature-based trips and how much those cost and what value they deliver. And then we can choose confidence intervals associated with both the quantities and the values, put in the start and end dates, and the tool automatically generates a kind of pre and post confidence present value for us. So that's education done, really. There's only a couple of things to input. There's a bit of information that you need to go and find in terms of the number of visits potentially as a result of the scheme, but there's guidance to help you try and estimate that. So then if you go across to the results dashboard, I won't go into the other sheets at the moment, but in terms of the results dashboard, Chris has already shown you this, but you can see the types of, in this graph, for example, the types of benefits that are coming through. And in this case, actually, it was air quality and amenity that tended to be the biggest ones, and carbon too. And that was, the amenity one was because of the number of properties and people adjacent to the site, and also there's proposed housing growth close to the site too. So amenity is kind of captures potentially some of a whole range of benefits, and that's why we need to be careful about double counting. So we haven't, for example, assessed both amenity and recreation. We've kind of suggested in this case we want to do one or the other, because they could be capturing some of the same things in terms of people using and enjoying that green space. So and as Chris said, you can export this information and use it to generate Word documents and result sheets and so on. So I think I'll stop there given the time, but we can take questions, and Viv and I, and we can look into some of the other sheets if people are interested in. But I think I'll stop there for the moment.
Great, thanks, Chris and Viv, for explaining that. We, as yet, haven't got any questions specifically on that, so maybe we should move on to more general Q&A. So, in the absence of questions, I have one really, and this relates to that tension that we've had between robustness, detail, and ease of use really. And I suppose what we have here is something that's really quite comprehensive, and I just wondered, Bruce or Chris, whether you could give a bit of an overview of the data that underpins some of the assumptions and calculations in terms of what was used, how much information was collated over, well, since 2013 really, because we're talking about a significant amount of time.
Bruce, do you want to start with that?
I'll start. So we did quite an extensive evidence review, and the original review is on the susdrain website. So we looked at, I think, over 500 originally in conjunction with Ecofutures. A huge range of information from the UK and overseas around, first, what the benefits are associated with SUDs, and then more broadly blue-green infrastructure. So the categories that are within BEST are comprehensive and cover all of those benefits. Then what's the evidence supporting those impact pathways for each of those benefit categories? So we really wanted to ensure that within the tool we were fairly confident in by undertaking an intervention over here, we could develop an estimate of the quantified and monetized value of the benefit associated with that intervention over there. So we wanted to really ensure we had the evidence, and it's all within the tool and the values library that Chris talked about. We wanted to be sure that we had the evidence to underpin those evidence chains. And then the monetary valuation as well. We've looked at, where possible, we've used evidence that's readily available. So, for example, the carbon category is underpinned by government published carbon prices, and we've used, different valuation databases and evidence from the Environment Agency, water companies, and others, academia, to underpin that. So it's hopefully all transparent and all available to go and look at. I'm pretty, and it's been peer reviewed and challenged all along the way too. So I'm pretty confident that it's as good as it can be. But we also recognise, as Paul said at the beginning, that it needs to be constantly. This is constantly improving, right? The evidence. So we need to update it over time too.
Yeah, and I think it is important to recognise that there has been some substantial pieces of work been done, for example, by the Environment Agency when they looked at the evidence base for natural flood management and working with natural processes. So we've really looked to kind of actually pull out as much information as we can of what's the latest. And I think the key thing is actually we do know new things are coming out all the time, and also I think we are seeing an increase now in institutions probably looking in more depth at this. So I would probably suspect probably even further in the next few years we'll actually gain a stronger evidence base for us to actually build into subsequent versions.
Great, thank you for that. And yeah, definitely is. there seems to be a number of projects out there at the moment, whether it be NERC or EPSRC, looking at SUDS delivery and the delivery of blue-green infrastructure. So we're hoping that that information and evidence, as that becomes available, can be used to underpin the evidence base going forward. So we haven't yet got any more additional questions, so I will just go through some of the last slides that we have, just in terms of information. So I wanted to thank the presenters, so Bruce Horton, Chris Stigman, both from Stantec, and Viv Levy from the Environment Agency. Thank you for that. Thank you for your attention and some of your great questions. The full suite of the best resources, which includes the guidance, the tools, the case studies and presentations and webinars on BEST, are available from that website page. And if you have any queries, there is also a feedback option at the bottom, and you can all just send us straight through to an email to best@susdrain.org. And also, just before we go, please don't forget that we're looking for nominations for our SUDS Champion of 2019. We all know that sometimes it can be quite challenging to get SUDS in the ground, and we think we need to celebrate those people that go the extra mile to actually get SUDS built, whether they be from a developer, local authority, water company, or whether they're consultants and practitioners. So anyone out there that's working to get SUDS in the ground, and we're particularly keen to try and get some champions from the community celebrated. So if you come across someone that's inspired you, informed you, or influenced someone to actually get SUDS in the ground, please do let us know. The form's not long to complete, and we can help you celebrate their work. So the link is there, but it's also a news item on the susdrain website. So thank you very much for your time, and if you have any more queries, as I say, please do send us an email, and that's the webinar finished. Thank you.